Hello everyone. Welcome to the Lightning Ball channel. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do so and activate the notification bell. Your support fuels my continued efforts. As Michael and Rimuru were engaged in their decisive battle, a series of riots and conflicts also erupted in the Ingrassia kingdom. Starting from this episode, we shift our perspective to Ingrassia. Since the orchestrator behind the Ingrassia riots was Velgrynd, the entire process was more complex compared to the wars that broke out in Degrul's and Eline's territories. Let's get started. After sending Rimuru off, Hinata immediately began investigating the current situation and discovered numerous serious incidents. The most severe of these was the uprising of the death row prisoners. These prisoners, including Reiner, who had been saved by Vega, had suffered inhumane treatment in the Ingrassia secret lab and harbored deep resentment towards the country. They freed Prince Elric, who had also been under house arrest, and made him their leader to initiate a coup. During the last Western Council meeting, Prince Elric had framed Demon Lord Rimuru, leading to a major international incident. However, both Rimuru and the King of Ingrassia wanted to avoid escalating the situation, so they concluded that Prince Elric had been manipulated and placed him under house arrest. This was a great humiliation for Prince Elric. Once freed, the first thing Elric did was to organize the newly empowered death row prisoners to incite riots in the capital and have Reiner assassinate his own father, the King of Ingrassia, framing Hinata for this crime, causing the people of the capital to unite in hatred against Hinata. Unfortunately, due to the previous incident being handled discreetly, no specific details were made public. With his handsome and gentle appearance and kind demeanor, Elric naturally became the person everyone trusted. On the other hand, Hinata, known for her cold demeanor, was respected but kept at a distance by the public. Thus, during this upheaval, Hinata became the #1 enemy of the entire kingdom. Hinata and the Holy Knight Order analyzed the current situation. First was Reiner. It was clear that the slander against Hinata was due to Reiner and Elric's personal vendetta. Everyone knew how weak Reiner was, so how could he have killed the King of Ingrassia, who was protected by many strong guards? This was a question posed by Nicholas and shared by everyone else. Nicholas was Hinata's loyal follower, willing to do anything for her praise but ruthless towards anyone outside her circle. At that moment, Testarossa joined the discussion and provided further information, stating that Reiner and the others seemed to have undergone reincarnation with the phantom race. In episode 92, after Reiner and many prisoners were saved by Vega, Velgrynd further facilitated their possession of phantom bodies. Those who failed the process became maddened monsters, while the successful ones, like Reiner, gained extraordinary powers. These individuals caused chaos in the capital, and the ordinary holy knights were unable to resist them. Moreover, because they had absorbed the phantoms, or mystic angels, they had become imbued with light attributes, rendering the holy purification barrier ineffective against them, thus worsening the situation. Despite the urgency, Hinata decided to go and reveal the truth to the public. In fact, the best course of action for Hinata would have been to temporarily flee the capital and explain things later. At the moment, Hinata was bearing the accusation of regicide, and the citizens, incited by Elric, firmly believed it. A simple explanation would not suffice. Worse still, if Hinata were killed here, the charge of regicide would be further solidified, leaving no room for defense. However, Hinata refused to agree to the escape plan. Firstly, the World Council involved key figures from various countries, and if they lost protection and were kidnapped or controlled, international cooperation would crumble, hindering the collective response to the Tenma Great War. Secondly, while Hinata did not share Rimuru's desire to save everyone, she would help anyone she could if they were within her reach. This was her guiding principle and the main reason she had earned companions' trust. After the discussion, Hinata, Testarossa, Moss, Cien, and others decided to set off towards what was likely the enemy's trap or battlefield. To counter sudden attacks, Testarossa ordered Moss to enter reconnaissance mode, spreading his clones within a 1-kilometer diameter, forming a sensory zone resembling a barrier. This setup allowed them to respond immediately to any sudden attacks within a 500-meter range. Even a light-speed attack would face about a second of reaction time under this mode combined with a million-fold perception acceleration. Hinata quickly understood Testarossa's intent. Both women were certain that the current riots were merely a bait before the enemy's true action. These two intelligent women reached the same conclusion. When the enemy targeted the World Council, they had already identified their ultimate goal, which most likely was Emperor Masayuki. Testarossa appreciated intelligent people, and Hinata was undeniably one. Conversing with Hinata made Testarossa feel pleased. At one point, Testarossa even considered making Hinata her subordinate, though she knew Rimura-sama would never allow it. In a way, Testarossa also envied Hinata, noting how Rimuru seemed especially happy and unguarded around her. Although Rimuru and Hinata were not a couple, many, including Testarossa, mistakenly believed they were. Hinata's intelligence, courage, and wit reassured Testarossa, contrasting sharply with the countless historical examples of nations falling due to foolish women. The two smart women continued discussing and perfectly reconstructed the enemy's plan, using Leon as bait to lure Rimuru into a trap while assassinating Emperor Masayuki during Rimura's absence. Hinata couldn't help but worry about Rimuru, considering his opponent might be the legendary Michael, who had absorbed the power of the true dragons. Testarossa, however, firmly believed that Rimura-sama would never lose, confident that Rimura had already anticipated the enemy's intentions. As for Masayuki, he had disappeared from the council shortly after the riots began. Velgrynd, being extremely intelligent herself, quickly realized the enemy's plan and hid Masayuki. With Scorched Dragon Velgrynd personally guarding him, theoretically, no one could be safer than Masayuki. Considering this, the enemy's best strategy to lure out Masayuki might involve defeating Testarossa and Hinata, forcing Masayuki to come to their rescue when they were on the brink of death. Hinata and Testarossa hoped that Masayuki, though a kind person, would prioritize his safety and calmly analyze the situation as an emperor should. Given the situation, the two women devised their plan of action: confront their opponents directly, eliminate them all, and draw out any lurking enemies. By achieving victory, all problems would be resolved. With that in mind, Nicholas stayed behind to observe and react accordingly, while the rest proceeded to the palace square, ready to engage in a decisive battle. The palace square was equipped with magical monitoring devices, ensuring that the entire fight would be witnessed by the citizens of the capital in real time. Upon seeing Hinata's arrival, Elric and Reiner displayed sinister smiles. Besides Elric, Reiner, and nearly 20 fully armed knights, all of whom had gained incredible strength, were present. Using her unique skill, mathematician, Hinata noticed that Reiner's power far exceeded her own, so she planned to leave him to Testarossa. However, this idea was quickly dismissed when Vega appeared. Vega behaved as despicably as ever, making lewd and disdainful comments towards the two beautiful women. Vega, with his overwhelming strength, was far superior to Hinata, his power being more than 10 times hers. While Vega's vulgarity enraged Hinata, Testarossa responded with a calm, contemptuous tone, effortlessly provoking Vega. This quickly set the stage for their duel. Hinata then took the opportunity to taunt Reiner, attempting to lure him into a one-on-one fight, knowing that she had little chance of victory if all the enemies attacked simultaneously. Driven by a desire for revenge, Reiner accepted Hinata's challenge, and they commenced their duel. Hinata's strategy was to first take down Reiner, thereby weakening the enemy's morale and increasing her chances of overall victory. Her provocation succeeded, and Reiner resolved to defeat Hinata here to prove his strength. Hinata drew her legendary rapier, Phantom Pain, which she had received from Rimuru. Although it wasn't as high quality as the moonlight given to Chloe, it was still capable of executing Hinata's signature move, Dead End Rainbow. This technique could destroy not only the spiritual body but even the astral body, making it perfect for dealing with Reiner. However, in the first round, Hinata quickly realized the problem and decisively dodged Reiner's attack. Reiner's weapon was clearly of mythic-grade strength, and if their swords clashed, Hinata's weapon could be shattered. Although Hinata had reached saint level with her existence points slightly over 1 million, Reiner's 2 million existence points still posed a significant disparity. Based on the raw data alone, Hinata shouldn't have been able to win the fight. However, Hinata had accumulated 2,000 years of experience traveling through time with Chloe. In terms of overall strength, Hinata still had the upper hand. By foolishly choosing to engage Hinata in a one-on-one fight, Reiner had already sealed his fate. Through multiple exchanges of attacks and defenses, Hinata gradually gained control of the rhythm. Finally, during a swing of her sword, she seized the opportunity and disarmed Reiner. Believing she had secured victory, Hinata let her guard down. She didn't intend to kill Reiner but planned to capture him for trial, a fatal mistake. Reiner lacked any sense of chivalry, his treachery far exceeding Hinata's expectations. He never intended to fight Hinata fairly, and he ordered his subordinates to ambush Hinata at that moment. Although Hinata had magical perception and the support of Moss's sensory network, her attention was focused on Reiner. In the split second of battle, Hinata was caught off guard by multiple light bullets from Reiner's subordinates, which exploded around her. Seizing this moment of vulnerability, Reiner laughed maniacally, activated his mythic great armor, and extended 2 more long, thin arms. These 4 arms transformed into spears, which he hurled, piercing Hinata's limbs and severing her tendons, causing her to collapse to the ground. Hinata lost the strength to hold her sword. Reiner mocked her mercilessly, declaring that criminals didn't deserve human rights. His subordinates also hurled insults at Hinata. Despite this, Hinata's gaze remained resolute, showing she hadn't given up. Her face, drenched in sweat and blood, still exuded a striking beauty. Seeing Hinata in this state, Reiner's rationality evaporated. The once unattainable woman was now lying at his feet. The thrill of tormenting such a high-status individual filled Reiner with unparalleled joy. He raised his sword, preparing to sever one of Hinata's legs just to be sure. Even in her dire situation, Hinata refused to concede, glaring at Reiner with unwavering determination, asserting that she had not been defeated. On the other side, Testarossa, facing Vega, didn't have the capacity to assist Hinata. After all, from Testarossa's perspective, Hinata was once among the few who could fight Rimura-sama to a standstill, and she had not received any orders to protect Hinata. Testarossa reasoned that if Hinata were truly defeated, she could intervene later. More importantly, Vega was a formidable opponent. His existence points were several times higher than Testarossa's, and he could recover by absorbing corpses. Vega spread his powers throughout the Ingrassia capital, absorbing those who had turned into monsters among Reiner's subordinates, making himself nearly invulnerable. Though Testarossa felt anger and frustration, she had to act cautiously and plan her next steps. She realized that continuing to pressure Vega might lead him to use the capital's residents for regeneration. She needed external intervention to break the deadlock. Testarossa urgently contacted the Labyrinth Command Center, but every front was engaged in intense battles, and the labyrinth was in a state of emergency. Zijin had to guard the labyrinth, and Veldora was a primary target of the enemy, so external aid was not an option. Testarossa had to solve the problem on her own. However, something unexpected occurred. Just as Reiner was about to strike Hinata, a crisp sound was heard. A feather fan blocked his sword. The newcomer was none other than Scorched Dragon Velgrynd, who remarked that her brother Veldora had often praised Hinata, implying that Hinata shouldn't be in such a sorry state. Velgrind's arrival surprised everyone. She stated that she wasn't there to steal the spotlight, but because Masayuki was concerned about everyone's safety. Despite being the emperor, Masayuki still cared deeply about the well-being of his companions. Velgrynd looked at Masayuki with a loving gaze, and then an even more astonishing scene unfolded. Masayuki appeared, lying on top of Hinata, his hands groping her chest. Masayuki, though appearing composed, was actually panicking internally. He couldn't quite process what had happened, but he felt a soft sensation under his right hand. It was Hinata's chest. Masayuki's brain started to function again. He had intended to help the injured Hinata up but had apparently stepped on a stone, causing him to fall awkwardly on top of her. This incident exemplified Masayuki's incredible, almost supernatural, luck. What's more, their faces were so close that their lips were nearly touching, allowing Masayuki to fully appreciate Hinata's beauty. Her eyes, wide open, gleamed with black pupils, her lips smooth and glossy, and her skin, though unadorned by makeup, had a fine and delicate texture. Masayuki couldn't help but marvel at Hinata's beauty, understanding why Rimuru always seemed nervous around her. If not for his prior experience of being held by Velgrynd multiple times, Masayuki might have fainted completely. A second of this awkward, elongated moment passed before both of them reacted. Masayuki, now even more flustered and pale, tried to stand up and explain. However, just then, he felt a sudden impact from behind, as if something brushed past him, bringing with it a chilling sensation of near-death fear. Velgrynd exclaimed, not out of anger towards Masayuki, but from genuine concern. The reality was that as Masayuki fell, someone had launched a sneak attack. If Masayuki hadn't tripped over the stone and fallen, he would have been killed. Masayuki was indeed the embodiment of luck. He felt deeply moved, not just by the comforting sensation of being held, but also by the soft caress of Hinata's hair against his cheek. The ticklish sensation combined with her pleasant scent made him want to escape reality. But now was not the time to zone out. The assassination attempt was made by Arios. Arios was visibly irritated that his lethal strike had been dodged by Masayuki's bizarre luck. Originally possessing the unique skill murder, Arios had further developed the sub-skill, existence concealment, after acquiring the Lord of Judgment, enabling him to perfectly hide his presence. Together with Velwei, he had waited in the shadows, aiming to strike at the moment Masayuki appeared. However, his attempt had inexplicably failed. Since he was exposed, Arios assumed a combat stance, ready to attack. Velwei also stepped onto the battlefield, facing off against Velgrynd. At that moment, Venom, Minutes, Bernie, and Jiwoo positioned themselves in front of Masayuki, vowing to protect him at all costs. Meanwhile, Masayuki was utterly confused by the rapidly changing battlefield. The accidental touch of Hinata's chest made him want to explain himself, but being face to face with Hinata left him too nervous to speak. The Monster Federation had many beauties, but most of them were non-human, including Velgrynd. Hinata, on the other hand, had a familiar Japanese face, exuding a unique charm. Yet, he couldn't be deceived by appearances. Rimuru had warned him never to make Hinata angry. Even Veldora had nodded in agreement, solemnly stating that Hinata was very stubborn and would definitely seek revenge by any means necessary. Realizing that Hinata was a figure who could instill fear in both demon lords and true dragons, Masayuki hurriedly jumped away from her and bowed his head in apology. On the other hand, Hinata appeared calm but was internally struggling with various thoughts. Having never experienced anyone touching her chest, she was troubled about how to react appropriately. It seemed clear that Masayuki's action was due to circumstances beyond his control, leaving Hinata unsure of how to respond. Seeing Masayuki's flustered apologies, Hinata interrupted him, stating that she understood it was unintentional and not his fault. Masayuki still felt a chill down his spine, his brain completely frozen. He wanted to honestly explain the situation but feared being scolded, so he chose to remain silent. Velgrynd then made a surprising comment, stating that there was no reason for Hinata to be angry over a mere chest touch. She even told Masayuki that if it were her, he could touch for as long as he wanted. Velgrynd's smile made Masayuki feel even more terrified. Hinata, looking at the two with a contemptuous gaze, tried to stand up but groaned in pain. Seeing this, Nicholas rushed over and immediately used holy magic to heal Hinata's injuries. Nicholas, who was supposed to stay behind due to his insufficient strength, had coincidentally met Masayuki and informed him of the situation at the front lines, which prompted Velgrynd and Masayuki to hurry over. Nicholas was very concerned about Hinata, suggesting that it might be more prudent to leave the battle to Emperor Masayuki. Nicholas's suggestion terrified Masayuki, but thankfully, Hinata refused with a smile. It wasn't out of consideration for Masayuki but because she was furious with herself for her earlier mercy and mistake. The people of Ingrassia's capital were closely watching the battle. Initially, they supported Prince Elric, but as they witnessed Reiner's despicable and cruel behavior, more and more people began siding with Hinata. When Masayuki appeared under the influence of his ultimate skill, Lord of Hero, the people's support overwhelmingly shifted to Emperor Masayuki. Back on the battlefield, the healed Hinata could no longer tolerate Reiner's vile actions, especially since they resulted from her own carelessness. She announced that she would now take Reiner seriously, glaring at him coldly, provoking him. Reiner claimed he had gone easy on her because she was a woman and furiously declared that he would cut her into unrecognizable pieces. Reiner charged at Hinata, but Hinata remained calm, evading his attacks and exploiting the gaps in his armor to wound him. Despite having Phantom's power and a mythical weapon, Reiner still felt immense pain, which confused and terrified him. Hinata mocked him and continued her assault, using Dead End Rainbow to pierce his body, each strike causing excruciating pain. Reiner couldn't endure this torment. Although his physical wounds could heal, the psychological trauma was irreparable. In his desperation, Reiner called out for Vega's help, but Vega showed no sympathy for his comrade, reveling in his battle with Testarossa instead. Reiner's absorption of the Phantom's spiritual body made his spirit stronger, but this also meant he experienced pain for longer periods, driving him to despair. Meanwhile, Masayuki stood by, dumbfounded by the battlefield. He couldn't follow any of the movements, only seeing occasional flashes that indicated the ongoing battle. Indeed, Masayuki's eyes couldn't keep up with Hinata and Reiner's fight or the battle between Venom and Arios. He had to pretend he could see, feeling helpless. Masayuki was acutely aware of his own limitations, deciding to observe from the sidelines and leave the fighting to others. Even so, the realization that an enemy could kill him with a single strike filled him with fear. To quell his anxiety, Masayuki focused on his recent happy memory, his interaction with Hinata. Her forgiveness and accurate assessment of the situation as unavoidable made him feel relieved, immersing him in a sense of being understood. What Masayuki didn't realize was that this sense of happiness had an incredible impact on the battlefield. Lucky Field responded to Masayuki's wishes, bestowing infinite luck on his allies and granting hero blessing to all who supported him. For example, Venom and his 3 comrades faced Arios, whose existence points far exceeded theirs, making any hit from him potentially lethal. Their strategy involved Demon Peer Venom acting as a shield, Minutes distracting Arios, Bernie weakening his abilities, and Jiwoo launching attacks to accumulate damage on Arios. Thanks to the Lucky Field, none of Arios' attacks could land on Venom, allowing their strategy to proceed smoothly. Arios' patience waned, knowing that the longer the battle dragged on, the angrier Feldway would become. Meanwhile, Reiner lay on the ground, crying out in pain, but no one moved to help him. His subordinates were completely suppressed by Moss, Cien, and the others. On the square, Feldway exhibited effortless control while fighting Velgrynd, perfectly blocking all attacks with Castle Guard. Arios was being held back by Venom and his group, while Vega was thoroughly enjoying his battle with Testarossa. The intensity of the battles escalated further. Alright, that's all for this video. In this episode, we can clearly see that Feldway's battle strategy far surpasses that of Michael and Zelenus. Winning a battle requires not just personal or army strength on paper, but also excellent battle tactics and war planning. This is what makes Feldway so difficult to deal with. In future episodes, Feldway will often orchestrate battles that are exhausting to counter. Masayuki continues his usual trope of creating miracles whenever he sees a beautiful woman. Masayuki is a character better developed in the light novel compared to the web novel. If Rimuru knew that Masayuki had touched Hinata's chest, he would probably be insanely jealous. In our next episode, Masayuki will take center stage, and the most powerful skill of the Lord of Hero will be showcased for the first time in the novel. The departed heroes will return collectively, maintaining their peak strength to help Masayuki turn the tide of the battle. Exciting developments await. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support is greatly appreciated. See you in the next one.